Hi everyone, welcome to our session. My name's Ellie Dearlove and I'm a Knowledge Transfer Manager for Cereals and Oilseeds at AHDB. Our session this afternoon is about on-farm trials and tribulations, and how to get more from your on-farm trials. And the reason why we put this panel together was because obviously doing your own on-farm trials and experiments is a really valuable way of getting data and insights into different management practices and how that can influence your farming business. But a reoccurring theme today and yesterday is the vast amount of information and data that we have at our fingertips. And I think a really tricky element is turning that information into practical and actionable decisions for your farm. And so I'm really excited to be joined this afternoon by our panel of experts. And they're going to be able to go through how we can take our trials one step further. So just quickly, how we're going to be set up. We've got around 25 minutes. I have lots of questions. I'm sure you have lots of questions as well. So we're going to jump straight in, and then I'll open the floor to any questions that you might have. So before we do, just some quick introductions. So on the end here, we have David Blacker. He is a farmer of combinable crops in the beautiful North Yorkshire. He has a vast amount of data on all elements of his farm from many years of running trials, and he's also our Strategic Cereal Farm North host. So for those of you that are not familiar with AHDB Strategic Cereal Farms, we have a network that are putting research into practice. So we follow our farm hosts for a 6-year period whilst they run trials looking at innovative ways to address challenges specific to their farming business. So Dave has been working with ADAS to address his soil health through drainage trials, living mulches, cover crops, applying organic matter, with an ultimate aim of reducing cost. And we are also joined in the middle here by Matt Smee. He is head of agroecology and fantastic at knowledge exchange and taking research and making it digestible into actionable insights from that research. So the agroecology website, I'm sure you will advertise very well, but it's a really good source of information for agroecological and regenerative farming practices. And last but certainly not least, we have Lauren Smith, who is Associate Professor of Agricultural Systems at Reading University, and he works on all elements from big picture sustainability to scaling up farming systems and behavioural change across the food sector. So, before we run out of time entirely, we'll jump right in with some questions. And my first one is to you, Dave, if that's okay. We're talking through the key elements of on-farm trials before we get started, and how do we balance being scientifically robust, but also practical in terms of working on a working farm.
Afternoon, everybody. So when I've done trials for years, it's quite common to see people trying to overcomplicate a trial, trying to look at too many things when you start off. You just end up getting a very confused data set when you do that and start to unpick things. So first thing I would advise anyone to do is keep it simple. Start off with a question you want answered, so you know exactly what you're going to look at through the trial. So there's plenty of stalls up and down. The stands here selling squirrel spit or something like that. Perfect for a trial. Go and do a tramline trial on that. But know what you want to get out of the trial. Know what you want to be looking at. So are you looking for less disease on a leaf, or are you looking for, is it blatantly down to better rooting in the crop, or so you need to set those questions out to start with, and then as the trial runs on, you can then work out have you answered those questions as it runs. Another pitfall is people just jump in and do a complete field. You always have to do I'll have a control strip, so you know if anything's actually worked or not, and have as many replications in it as you can. And also, a lot of people say, I'll try anything once. In trial stuff, you need to really say, I'll try anything 3 times, because what works in one year on one soil type won't work in another soil type, which is the good thing about the strategic farm. We've got that time scale to run things through a rotation. When it comes to your layout, it sounds obvious, but don't put your trial on a headland that you turn on, or don't don't run a trial in a field. If you're doing a trial on rape, don't put it in a field that's going to get hammered by pigeons, or don't run it in a shady field where it's not consistent. So there's plenty of things there for you to be thinking about. Pass on.
You basically just said what I was going to say. I think at the headline, I would say a lot of this stuff is around collaboration. And there are so many organisations and researchers out there, is go and talk to the researchers. They love what they do. They want to get involved, even if it's just a bit of advice over a beer. So don't feel you have to take this on yourself as a wholly owned thing. I used to be a farmer before I started working in Knowledge Exchange, and I ran some crap trials. I would take on way too much. I wouldn't have a control. I was collecting data irregularly, and even then they still were useful to a point. But I think the overarching aim of keeping it simple and asking yourself, what is the question I'm trying to find out here? Is it a new cultivar that you're trialing? Is it a totally new system? Is break that down, ask that question, and have the control. But don't rely on yourself. Rely on the industry. There's a lot of people go around here who will jump in and help you. And I think that's probably the foundation of where I should have started when I was running all of these terrible trials on my farm.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, so I think these guys have said it all really, but I think I'll just add to saying that keeping it simple is so important with trials in our experience. So not being overly ambitious, because it's really tempting to try and sort of solve all the world's problems with a single trial. But I think in my experience, taking a step back and really keeping the research question well defined, simple and focused. So looking at particular types of tillage, for example, min-till versus conventional, and really zooming in on that one aspect is so important, I think, because so many trials I've been involved with tried to sort of stretch themselves too far. And the replication aspect, so if we can get sort of time series data, that's so much more useful. But I think even a single year's data is incredibly useful as well if we can have that contextual information that goes alongside it. So around the weather conditions, the soil type, and preferably across the farm as well. So with the tests and trials we're working on now, we're encouraging farmers to collect data across 3 fields. So you're capturing different points in their crop rotation, different soil types, topographies, and so on. So even with a single year's data, then we're getting a good cross-section across a large number of farms. So if you can't get that sort of temporal variation across the years, if you can get it in spatial terms, that's really good as well. And that contextual information on top as well with regard to things like weather conditions. Obviously, very dry spring this year, taking that into account in the interpretation is so important.
Yeah, really true. And I think I can get especially excited about all the potential experimental designs we can have, loads of different treatment options, but it can get really complicated really quickly. So keeping it simple and thinking about what your aims are, which sort of leads on to my next question, that when we're on the other side of our trial, we've set it up, what sort of outputs should we be measuring? What's the most important so that we can make meaningful insights from those trials? So I'm going to come to you, Matt, first.
So I think I look at this through the lens of kind of knowledge exchange and understanding what the trial brings you from a change of practice perspective. So these guys can talk about the data a bit more, but what I look at is when we take someone's trial research, or we take a kind of multiple papers and understand what's happening, it's almost the agronomy behind what's going on, any changes to your system that you're seeing through the trials. So we like to map out the year, maybe it's a 1-year trial, maybe it's a 2-year process, what's happening, what are your actions and considerations in spring year 1, what are your actions and considerations in summer year 1, and go through the process, and at each step look at what the risks are, because other farmers are going to want to learn from what you've done. You're going to change your system and you will forget what you did in spring a year ago, so I think almost annotate that kind of diary of a serial trialist. Maybe it's a great book I could write. Great maybe isn't the word, but I think, look at the softer side of what's happening, because the farmers want to know. They want to know what's your soil health data? Yes, what's your yield? But actually, what on earth are you doing in summer when this crop is behaving in a different way under this other system?
Great, thanks, Matt. Lawrence, do you have anything to add?
It's a really good point there, I think, and I would just say, the more pictorial elements we can get into our trials, the better. I think photos of trials when they're ongoing are incredibly useful in terms of when we come to interpret that data and provide that sort of context as well around the conditions we're faced with. So mentioned around the soil type as well, making sure you're capturing that in terms of where the trials are taking place, the location, it's in the farm as well on a map, so it's a useful way to sort of keep records. And also just making sure that when we're collecting this data that we're trying to sort of collect information on the economic impact of the trial as well, because for me, when we've been exchanging the knowledge with farmers and land managers, having that economic data is really fundamental to sort of getting the impact and getting the adoption out there, because essentially a lot of it will come down to the effect on the bottom line. So for me, it's really important to have that aspect incorporated within trials in terms of the economics of the inputs and the outputs.
Thank you. I think, Dave, you would agree with that as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would. I mean, at farm level, I probably see things a little bit differently, and a lot of things I want to know are. It does depend on the trial, but it largely comes down to a yield map at the end of the day of have you produced more product, and what's the economic return? Is there a viable is this a viable thing to carry across the whole farm from this trial? But I've looked at cover crops before. So the measurements you'll be looking at there are more judgmental, more soil health kind of judgments. I'd say pick your lowest hanging fruit first. Do the trial on farm that ticks the box of your most restricting factor, and try and work out the answers to that first, and then move up the tree from there.
That's great, thank you. So we've gone through elements to consider before the trial design, what we're going to measure afterwards. We have a lot of data. Lawrence, do you have any insight or advice for somebody who might be overwhelmed by the amount of data that they have, and how they can make more sense of it?
Yeah, it sort of comes back to the first point, I think, this one, in terms of like starting small and with a sort of focused research objective. I think that's really important, and sort of thinking about the data that you have and how that could be useful for answering some of those more so what might come across as simple research questions, but those research questions are likely to be very useful for others as well. So, even something around sort of comparing different types of tillage. For example, you might think that's work that's sort of been dusted, so to speak, but there's still a lot of unknowns around this, and particularly in terms of how different tillage approaches work in different soils. And I think there are a lot of frameworks available as well in terms of how you collect data and how we can sort of interpret it. And one of those is the Global Farm Metric, and that's got a tool, a sort of front end that can help you to sort of interpret your data and to sort of think about how you work with it in a sort of systematic way in terms of looking at the impacts of your whole farm system. So I'd encourage people to get involved with that work if they can, because we've been working with that framework across many farms in the UK and across the world, actually, in terms of collecting information systematically and thinking about what's really useful on an economic level, but environmentally and socially as well. So do check out the resources there. The other thing I would say is, like, benchmarking is so valuable and important. I think having your data shared and open to others is really helpful in terms of decision making, and it can also help to exchange knowledge around how you collect data with others who've been there and done that, so to speak. So I think those are the three things I'd emphasise.
That's me now. So I had a chat with a few people about this question, a couple of farmers, and what came out was that this is an issue in the industry as a whole, that farmers have too much data anyway, whether it's from a trial or not, and trying to interpret it is a really hard thing to do. So you're adding more data into the mix by doing trials on your farm than you would normally have. You can sit and analyse data 1,000 ways from Sunday if you wanted to, and it is massively overwhelming. I think it's the question of kind of how to not be overwhelmed is, I don't think you need to not be overwhelmed, but what you need to do is go back to what I said at the very beginning, which is collaborate and talk to researchers and find out what they would look at and understand how they can assess these things. There is this small fund called the Adopt Fund that has researchers built into those programs, and that's where you can not be overwhelmed, and you can get the best stuff out of it as well. So a farmer said to me, it needs to be someone else's responsibility, and that would stop him being overwhelmed. So I would take that advice.
I would agree with that. One of the things that the first thing we did on the strategic farm north was look at all the data I've got, because I've got so much data, I don't know what to do with it. And my tiny little brain's not good enough now to compute with everything I've got. If you took every measurement and put it out on this floor, you'd probably cover the floor. So trying to trying to expect the human brain to pick through that, it's just impossible. And I'd also say, people tend to put bias into things as well. So, I've quite often looked at my yield maps and my organic matter levels and seen if I can see a correlation between higher yielding areas from higher organic matter. But I know that's what I'm looking for, so I'm going to put bias into the way I look at the map to try and prove what I want the answer to be. So I would completely agree. I would just say, let someone else do it.
Thanks for that. And thank you for the Adopt plug as well. We do have some more information on this table if you're interested in funding for doing your on-farm trials. And ADAS is running the Adopt Support Hub. They're just over the way if you have any questions. So coming back to you, Dave. So what does it take to turn individual trials data for your farm into wider learning for the sector? So talking about networks or any experience you have in that?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to be working with you a lot, so you do all that for me. But if you weren't, it's a big problem at farm level of, where do you go to find data? I've quite often spent hours on Google Scholar and looking for data and research to back up something that I've done. And there isn't. We're just useless at it. There's not one place you can go to look at a massive data set. So it should be a DEFRA funding area where it needs a bit of DEFRA funding to get one central place, so all the trials data can go in one central place, and you could even have a couple of scientists in there peer reviewing it as it comes in. Collectively together, all that information would be a really powerful source, but at the minute we don't have that. So it's difficult to try and get the word out when you've just done one trial on one field. You are very much looking at local networks but your monitor farm thing, you're probably missing an opportunity there because you've got monitor farms up and down the country. If they all ran the same trial in the same year and then repeated that for 3, you'd have a big data set there. So I think we need to raise our game a little bit.
So I would say, I'm a bit biased on this, but agroecology provides this function to a point. There's practice and research on the site, but what we want farmers who are trialling things and have interesting results, positive or negative, to come and talk to us, and we can help you guys share the data that you've got, share your experiences. We work with a lot of farm clusters to kind of bring events into those spaces. So if you are part of a strong farm cluster that's very active and and you're doing trials, come and talk to me, because we can help you do some knowledge exchange around that within the cluster. We can bring in some specialists who could come and talk about soil health. If you were trying to improve soil health, your cluster members can see what's going on farm. We can bring in some other speakers. We can have a barbecue. We might have a beer. So there's kind of the spaces do exist for the informal kind of cross farmer learning. And we also want people just to do write-ups of their trials as well, to share their experiences. That may help you as well, kind of crystallise the process you've been through, to sort of get it down in an informal content for like a blog post or something. So yeah, come and have a chat with me. We'll take anything within reason.
Yeah, I'd second and third that as well. So I think, for me, the meaningful change aspect often, my own experience has come from seeing practices on the ground, right? So it goes back to earlier point about, if a picture paints 1,000 words, I think a farm visit paints 1 billion, so to speak. So if you can actually get out onto neighbours' farms or collaborators' farms to see what they're doing, and vice versa, have people come onto your own farms, I think that's so inspiring. And it brings a lot more than just sort of looking at the facts and figures. And I think as a research scientist, often we get hung up on the numbers, but actually, the experience is so much more valuable, I think, in many ways, in terms of exchanging the ideas. And even if a trial was, completely failed, it's extremely valuable to have that exchange around what went wrong, so to speak. Why didn't this crop establish, for example? So having that face-to-face interaction, I think, is incredibly meaningful for getting behaviour change to happen on the ground. So I'd really encourage more of that to be built into research projects. And so on a related note, I think in terms of interpreting the results from trials as well, I think it's very useful to sort of talk to others, or talk to a researcher, talk to an advisor who's been sort of co-developing and implementing the trial with you, to sort of go through that process, because I think the actual process itself is incredibly valuable in terms of learning from what's happened in the trial, not just the results themselves.
Brilliant, thank you. I just want to do here a shameless plug for HDB Strategic and Monitor Farms. So if you haven't been to any of these events, come and see your local Monitor and Strategic Farm and see what they're doing near you in your region. That information is available online, or you can speak to any of the colleagues. So my last question is sort of, what's the point in sharing stuff? How are you going to make big impact? Can we change things in a political landscape? How do we make as big an impact as we possibly can?
Is that me
Who
again?
wants to jump in?
I'll jump in. So I would say, look around you. We're at Groundswell. The number of research-based sessions that are being put on, the number of people in the audience. Everyone wants to know what everyone else is doing. Everyone wants to see what's happening in a slightly different way that might make them a bit more profitable, a bit less heavy on the environment, doing something different, doing something interesting. Like, it's what I do day to day, and I love it. The fact that Groundswell is, 9,000 people this year? You know, the number of people who will have gone to a trials-based talk, you know, the hunger is there for it. So there's a demand, there's a need, and I think you just, come and get involved with people like me, with farm clusters, even through the HDB monitor farms. Like, there's so much space to share that knowledge and learn from it. And if that's happening more and more, that your trials will get better, and hopefully you'll pick up a few things that can help you on the way as well.
That's great, thank you. Does anybody have any additions?
So social media posts are always quite good. X has become a bit of a cesspit since Musk bought it, but the amount of stuff I see posted on there that's actually reasonably good research that I wouldn't even know had happened unless I'd spotted it on there. That kind of comes back to the previous point of there's no one central place to go to for us to find it. So if sometimes you find a bit of research and you're stuck behind a paywall, you can't get to it. Discussion groups are great. Farm to farm learning is probably the most powerful way for farmers to learn this. A get-together group and doing farm walks, that's fantastic. Politically, you could meet with your local MP and he might be interested in what's going on farm level, but I think ultimately we need a government that's prepared to listen, and currently we haven't got that, so I don't think there's any chance that we're going to change that anytime soon.
Yeah, I think on the comparison front, I think getting together and exchanging results is so valuable. But from a benchmarking perspective, we all like to sort of compare our performance to others, and getting a sense of where you're at, economically or environmentally, it can be so valuable in terms of like seeing where you are in terms of a group of people operating in a similar condition. So I think that benchmarking aspect is so crucial for me, and that's incredibly valuable for the people we've been working with over the years and did the different trials. So making sure that element sort of built into a trial, I think, is very important in terms of bringing together the individuals that were involved and sort of having an open and frank sort of Chatham House rules discussion about the results from the trial, what went wrong, what went well, and what would you do next time.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think we'd all agree there's no point in doing anything clever unless you're going to tell everyone about it, and that's why everybody's here, isn't it, over the last couple of days. So thank you so much for answering all of my questions, and I want to open the floor if anybody has any burning questions for our panel. We have a roaming mic, so if you can stick your arm in the air.
Hi, Chris from Microbiome. So we're looking to do some field trials through the ADOPT program, and what I've found is we're in a bit of a chicken and egg type situation where to get trials going and get a bit of interest, we need a bit of evidence, because our approach is quite novel, and more often than not I get the impression that people are thinking that I'm trying to sell them like snake oil. But a lot of what we want to do is share knowledge and open up conversations about new ways of doing things, but ultimately we need to have evidence that what we want to do works, but it is hard to get that initial interest. So my question is what kind of ways could we maybe communicate what we want to do if it is a bit more unconventional to get some interest and get some trials going?
I think being here is a really good space to have those conversations and build some trust within the farming networks. I feel for you that you're trying to do something that's a bit out there, and then they say there's no research on it, and then if you are selling a product, people they don't take it as on face value. Engage with the clusters, because you can speak to facilitators and say, look, we are doing this, we want to trial it, we're not trying to make money off it, and you can go in through a conduit that might help you, and you can build a body of support for the projects and farmers who want to trial it. If it's a cluster, they'll also be in a similar area, which will make your life a bit easier. But I think from the data perspective, I don't know where you go with that sort of stuff. If you're looking at projects and there is no data, that
Yeah, one of the things we've done in those contexts is sort of look at work from sort of related industries or related sectors. Looking at more on the sort of manufacturing side, for example, and social innovations that have happened sort of more generally, for example, in that space around sort of providing evidence and backing for concepts that we're exploring that are a bit more sort of exploratory in their approach. So we're, in terms of building on or standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, we've looked at those sort of related sectors and tried to sort of take those concepts and ideas rather than the product itself, and sort of focused on those as the evidence base to build on, if that makes sense. And I would say on a practical level as well, with the ADOPT program, so the Innovate team are really helpful and good, and they've got there's a help desk there that's sort of available to support applications to that 15 million program, which sounds really exciting. I was in the session yesterday and encouraged people to get involved with that. But yeah, they're very supportive, and I've heard really good things about the level of engagement there. So I'd encourage you to reach out.
I'd say you've come to the perfect event. If you're looking for people to run trials for you, I'd just say network, talk to farmers. There'll be plenty of people out there who'll be willing to do trials. You might have to throw a bit of free product on there to get them convinced to do it. But I don't think an event like this, just go and find a regen farmer and offer him a bit of product to run the trial, and I'm sure you'll be falling over people.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the floor?
You talked about the sort of data analysis and that sort of thing. What's your thoughts about the potential for using AI to do some of that? And I know there are certain security concerns and whatnot, but
yeah, shall I come in? Yeah, so that's an interesting one. Is speaking with a lecturer's hat on, with sort of the higher education sector, sort of grappling with AI. So I think from a data analysis point of view, yeah, it's got a lot of potential in terms of the qualitative data analysis. So we've been looking at using it for working with sort of interviews to identify themes, where you have often with interviews you end up with reams and reams of data, and AI seems to be well set up for dealing with those very large data sets. I think for me it's crucial that you have that human element afterwards to sort of check that what it's come out with actually makes sense, and you have the research questions as well. But I think it's a really useful tool, time-saving device, and particularly when you're dealing with those big data sets, not just on the qualitative but on the quantitative as well, and sort of looking for those broad patterns. But but still advocate for the human element to check what that sort of first screening has come up with. I think it's very essential.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I'm a terrible Luddite, so I'll defer to the university lecturer.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think AI is such a powerful thing, but it's probably beyond the ability of most farmers to know how to get there with it. But yeah, if there was somebody who had that set up, then it would be fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a really interesting talk yesterday about the AI data interpretation and sort of the extent that we can take advantage of that, but also, like you touched on, need to be careful about where you're putting your data. It's incredibly valuable, and just, not openly sharing to ChatGPT. Are there any other questions from the floor?
Just a shameless plug on the AI was for the FEC. I don't know if anyone saw the FEC pack demonstration earlier, but they were showing how AI can be used for identification within the fecal ed counting approach. So for me, that's a really exciting development, and I can see sort of there's a lot of potential there for other areas as well around sort of making sense of data. But again, they had the human element on top of the machine element to sort of check that what it was come out with made sense. I think that's crucial.
I know Rothamsted are doing some work with cameras photographing dung beetles in dung at Andy Gray's farm, and so they're developing that model as well. So I think it's not, there's maybe an AI element, not from data analysis, but in terms of data collection, that could be really quite strong. Turns out I did have something to add.
Thank you. So just to wrap, oh, sorry, we do have time for a question. The microphone's back.
Thank you. I actually arrived slightly late because I had an interview. So I just wanted to know the extent to which, because I'm a researcher, university researcher, the on-farm trials are doing things like replicates, and how you're setting things up like that.
Lawrence, are you happy to jump in here?
Yeah, I can try. Yeah, so we're trying to replicate in terms of the spatial aspect of the trial. So sometimes it's quite difficult to do with a temporal replication over many years, because we've been working with like 1 year of data, but we're encouraging data collection across the farm, so within across 3 fields, for example, to sort of capture different points in the crop rotation, and then collecting as much data as we can alongside around the conditions of that year, for example, in the soil type, topography, and so on, just to sort of set those results in context. But with a lot of the research we're doing at Reading, it's we're working directly with commercial farms, and often we only have 1 year to collect that data, but we're trying to get that replication across the sample of farms, 100 farms, say, across the UK, but then within the farm as well, across those fields, to capture different conditions.
I think I'll jump in and say as well, with the strategic farm work that we're doing with Dave, we've got a lot of replication within field as well, because there's a lot of variation underlying, and we need to be able to replicate across the field so that we can pull out those minute differences. And then hopefully, if we repeat those over a few years, sort of see how those differences can be pulled out and, influenced by different environmental conditions. Anything to add, Matt or Dave?
No, not really.
With the strategic centre you referred to, are you deploying sensors to get real-time data?
Yes, we are. We've got a couple of soil sensors in at the minute that are doing all sorts. We're collecting weather data as well. So yeah, we're trying to pick up as much data as we can without. It's easy in hindsight to miss something and look back and go, I wish we'd measured that. So we are trying to get as much data on every aspect of.
And is that data available?
It's available to me at the minute. It's on my laptop, and I've got the passwords. But yeah, I mean, weather data you can pick up reasonably.
But
readily.
the sensor data on the farm.
Yes, it can be made accessible because it's ultimately AHDB funded, but it's a levy board, and it's their data, it's your data because you're all paying for it.
So we do have open farm days where we can come talk about the data, and also at the end of the season, after harvest, we share all of the results. So you'll be able to find that information on the AHDB website as well if you just keep it posted. Is there a question on the front? Plug? Yeah.
It's just, since everybody's been doing shameless plugs, I just wanted to highlight the Adopt Fund and the fact that you guys don't have to do everything yourselves. We have an innovation support hub for that. It's SADA, Soil Association, and Agritech. We're all happy to help you. So if you have an idea, go to any of our stands and talk to us. We can help you get the right facilitator, get the right researchers here, and just also get to talk about your projects afterwards, which is a critical part of it. So come and talk to us. It's actually good fun doing a research. I think that everybody here you can see their faces, a smile even in the bottom and everything. So give it a try, and just to say that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I think that's all we have time for this afternoon, unless there's any more burning questions. But our panelists will be staying for a couple of minutes afterwards, so come and find us. And thank you so much for coming and firing questions at us. Thanks again. Round of applause for our panelists.
Thanks.